Out. Hey friends, Eddie here. This is the book club for the Read Well podcast. Tonight we're finishing our conversation on Octavia Butler's Kindred. I am a huge fan of Octavia Butler, but that doesn't mean you have to be. Obviously, that's part of being in a book club and reading with friends. You get to experience new ideas, new thoughts, and some of them you'll agree with, and some of them you won't. So I'm curious to see what you thought about this book tonight. But before we do, I'm just letting a few people into the room here. So feel free to get yourself settled, grab a glass of wine, whatever you'd like to do. I'm going to do a little housekeeping just for anybody that's new, because I am seeing a few new faces here. So at the Read Well podcast, we have a unique way that we do book club, and it's something that I feel adds a nice little bit of flavor to our way of doing things. And that is that in between each book, we take a week off. We don't read together for an entire week. So starting today, we will not be reading a book together for 7 days. Okay, that the reason for that is because our motto is to read slowly, take notes, and apply the ideas. And it is that last part that is very important. And so we put a week in between each of our books to sit down and think, what was that book about? What did I like? What didn't I like? Perhaps do some journaling and try to apply a lesson or two to your personal life. There are a lot of things in Kindred that I feel like could be applied to life in terms of being a better human, a better friend, a more empathetic person, and so on. We can talk about all of that tonight. But next week, when we meet on Tuesday, I don't have it with me. I can go grab a copy real quick, and I will soon. But we're starting Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. He is a medical professional who wrote a book about our use of prescriptions as sort of a crutch at the end of stage of life, and it's a great look philosophically and psychologically. The question being, how should we sort of approach our final days in a way that is um, kind and appropriate to ourselves and those around us and so on. I haven't read the book. This is one of the books this year I have not read. I just liked the premise. I liked the idea of taking end of life stuff, which I think about all the time, and our reliance on the medical system. And it sort of clashes them from somebody who is in the system. I just thought that would be interesting to talk about. I'm hoping it goes well. Seems to be a book that a lot of people have enjoyed on the internet, so hopefully we will too. But tonight we are reading pages 177 to the end of the book. Well, we're not reading, we're discussing. And I've posted my notes in the community. So if you go to the reading schedule in the navigation, all you do is you click on the, oh, where'd you guys go? I lost you. You click on the reading schedule, you click on the book itself, which is Kindred, and you'll see my notes there. I apologize for being so slow on posting last week's video. By way of update, this office space that I'm in, I'm getting kicked out of in like 2 weeks, perhaps. I have a little less than 2 weeks, somewhere in there. And so I'm just really stressed right now, to be quite honest. I'm trying to build a home office so I have a place to continue meeting with you all and recording YouTube and all that stuff. And so life for me will get much calmer on January 23rd, or so it should be. And I also started a new semester today, which sounds like madness, but actually school grounds me and it gives me a schedule and it keeps me rhythmic, and that's a good thing for me. It's just how my personality works. If you're interested, I am taking History of Philosophy, which is great. We're starting from 2300 BCE up to present day philosophers. It's going to be a crazy semester. And I'm also taking Critical Approaches to Literature, which is going to be really great. And I want to share a quick lesson with you that I got in class today. But that class is going to be very valuable, I feel like, for our group, because what we're doing is we're looking at how there are, I think, 12 different critical approaches or lenses that we can use to look through when we're reading a text. And those lenses can help add insight, add depth, add meaning, and so on. But this isn't one of those frameworks or lenses, but I thought it was really great. It's just a basic formula that was very impactful to me for some reason. But it's just this, the literary formula being author plus reader equals text. That's it. Author plus reader equals text. And the reason why that is so valuable is because the author did his or her thing however long ago. Octavia Butler wrote this book many, many years ago in the 70s, right? And it is now permanent. She's done her thing. Her part of the equation is done. Okay. She shared her message in a way that meant something to her, and she cannot update it or change it. That text has now been given to us. And then we bring ourselves to that book in whatever mood we have, in whatever sort of preconceived notions we have, in whatever approach to life we have, and so on. And so we are the reader part, and that is the variable part of the equation, right? Author plus reader, the variable part equals text. And so the text actually changes because of you. The text means something very different because of you at all times. I'm always fascinated if you read Goodreads articles or reviews, any book, doesn't matter how great it is, it has many, many people that hate it, many, many people that love it. And a lot of that has to do with what people brought to themselves when they read the book. So um, my hope for us as a book club is that we're inspiring a community that is bringing the best version of ourselves as readers to these books so that we can actually enjoy them clear-headedly. So with that, let's get in and let's start Kindred. Okay, we'll do our rating at the end of this book, or at the end of our notes tonight. I have, I believe, 10 or 11 notes, and the first one is on page 177. So if you're new here, I post my notes in the community. They're there for you to reference. I'll add my YouTube or my video to it as soon as possible. And then you can read those at your own leisure. And feel free at any time tonight to click the button down below, the little heart button that says react. When you do, that gives you the option to raise your hand. And that will put you in a queue, and you're welcome to speak or add your comments at any time. Just don't be like me. I'm being long-winded tonight. Try to be somewhat succinct because there are lots of great people and lots of great voices tonight. Okay, page 177, I titled it How Easily Slaves Are Made. So in this, Dana, our protagonist, she's gone through quite a bit, and this chapter is called The Fight. And the first paragraph there is rather large, but near the end of it, it starts with, Why had I taken yet another beating? Okay, she says, Why had I taken yet another beating? And why? Why was I so frightened now? Frightened sick at the thought that sooner or later I would have to run again. I moaned and tried not to think about it. The pain of my body was enough for me to contend with, but now there was a question in my mind that had to be answered. Would I really try again? Could I? I moved, twisted myself somehow from stomach onto my side. I tried to get away from my thoughts, but they still came. See how easily slaves are made, they said. So, in an act of trying to escape Rufus, this horrible slave master, she's beaten near to death. And she, in her strong modern philosophy, is somewhat broken and realizes how easily slaves are made. One beating, a little bit of pain can completely change your values, your ideals, your beliefs in life, right? Any thoughts about this passage or what Dana's going through or how slaves are made? While you're thinking, something to consider is that we have sort of a reaction to our experiences. And when we experience pain from another person, especially when we can't control that pain coming at us, um, it's it's pretty easy to become subservient just to stop the pain, right? If you've ever had even a long day at work, all you want is for it to stop, for all the bad things to stop, so you can just go relax, right? That's a very poor comparison. But when you're in pain, you'll pretty much do anything to make it stop. And so it can be somewhat hard to or unfair to judge people as weak or weak-willed. You should have stood up and fought for yourself when you haven't been the one that's been through the pain. Marilyn, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can see. I mean, it's such an awful pain too. I mean, just being
Mm.
whipped like that and everything. I can see why you would just, I mean, I think I would just probably cave in and give up. I don't know how strong I could be under those kind of circumstances. And it makes me think of the whole communist thing. I mean, they didn't even do so much physical stuff, it was all mental kind of thing. And look how everybody caved to that. Never mind if you're being physically beaten. So. Yeah, that was very moving to me, that whole part, where she's saying how easily slaves are made. I felt for her because I'm thinking I would never run again if I was her, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine being hung in the barn by my hands and just having my shirt ripped off and just being whipped across the back. I mean, that would change you as a person. That would change you mentally. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, they kind of were stuck in their situation,
Mhm.
and unless they rise up together, you rise up in numbers. If you're just an island on by yourself, it's hard to resist and fight against that tyranny. And you look at what happened in Afghanistan, with the failure in Afghanistan, you would think that the people had a taste of what freedom was like. But then
Mhm.
once US forces withdrew, the country just collapsed like within days. You wonder why wasn't it that they were able to fight back? So it's you just feel weak, I think. And if you don't have the numbers, the strength, the numbers, you're gonna not do so well.
Yeah, yeah, great comparison. Thank you. Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the passage kind of speaks to it for itself there on how a slave is made. But I like some of the parallels that, like Marilyn talking about communism and Kathy talking about Afghanistan. The comparison that came to mind for me was Nazi Germany. Because people look back on it now, 7 years later, and then how could the German people have allowed that to happen? Why did they go along with this? Why didn't anyone stand up? Well, there would have been Germans that were all on board with the Nazi philosophy, but there were a lot that were definitely not on board, and they very quickly learned how harshly they were dealt with if they were not on board. They were, brought into line or they faced brutal consequences. So it's kind of
Mhm.
a similar idea there that we see it happen so many different ways all around the world.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Edie, go ahead.
Like everyone else has said, I agree totally, and I liken this back to the lack of control. Yeah, sure, she can talk about, I should have done something, but she couldn't. She didn't have control. She didn't have control when she would be transported back to her home. She didn't have control here. I mean, there's only so much physical abuse you can take, and so when I read this passage, how easily slaves are made, well, if they had control, free will, control over their life, maybe it wouldn't have been so easy, for her to be made a slave. And like everyone else said, power in numbers. So I thought lack of control was a biggie here for Dana, being becoming a slave.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Yeah, nice job pointing out too the fact that she's in a physical constraint of being transported without her control. It's a great it adds to the flavor of being a slave where you're also not in control ever, right? It's another way for her to experience that. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, I had to remind myself that this book is often categorized as science fiction, right? And so one of the themes I like to track when I read science fiction is how easily we as humans get used to things. There's a book, Childhood's End, where spaceships descend over all the major cities around the world, and it just took a few months for humans to kind of get used to these spaceships kind of just floating overhead. And back in this book, in the fall, the chapter on the fall, she says, how easily we seem to acclimatize. Um, that you adjust to the place. She found herself adjusting to this place, and at one point, she even says that she found the Wayland house, to be home, right? And she was a little bit shocked by that. And it's just kind of a theme I think that Butler definitely addresses is, you know, for example, the kids playing that game, right, of a slave auction, and just how it seeps into us, and we become adjusted as humans.
Yeah, great to point out. Yeah. Uday.
Hi. I was just pointing out, I think these kind of things she's saying in the book kind of goes back to one of the reasons why she said she wrote the book when a lot of the um, Black Panther era people were talking about how disgusted they were with their ancestors for not fighting back.
Mm.
That if they were there, they would not have allowed this to happen. And I think she's trying to demonstrate, hey, they didn't have a choice, that, they had to survive. So they succumbed to it to basically survive and live. So I thought a lot of these points that she makes throughout the thing is trying to address that her response to the 1960s things that she's heard from other, during the civil rights.
Yes, yeah, definitely. As groups sort of reflect on history, it's easy to look back in hindsight and live, isn't it? Well, had I been in such and such an era, I would have done such and such a thing. And it's very easy to speak and say, speak that way. I was thinking about what Kathy said too. It, it made me think about how there are studies that have been done of people who, when faced with the concept of money and the idea of would you rather lose the money you've earned or have the potential of earning more money? I'm getting this wrong, but the idea is that most people would prefer to hold on to what they have, right? Rather than potentially earn even more kind of thing and risk it. There's this real fear we have of humans of losing what we have. I've earned this. This is my little space on earth. I'll do whatever I can to not lose this. To the point of not wanting to go out and sort of try new things that potentially could make life better because I don't want to lose this. There's a lot of psychology built in there, but I think this book helped me realize that too, that when we feel that outside pressure, it makes us all clamp down, myself included, and go, how do I protect this little square that I'm in? You gotta survive. So, well, okay, let's go to page 182. Titled this one, The Slow Doling of the Self. I liked the word doling. It's used here in the passage. You think about the process of using a knife, something that once was sharp, that had an edge, that was able to get a job done and cut. As you continue to use it and use it, it dulls over time. It is a slow process. Keep that in mind as we read. On 182, it starts with when Edwards was gone. When Edwards was gone, Alice came out of Carrie's cabin and began to help me. I felt sweat on my face mingling with silent tears of frustration and anger. My back had already begun to ache dully, and I felt duly ashamed. Slavery was a long, slow process of dulling. Um, I love that concept that, as Uday just pointed out, I think, somebody pointed out that it was Ryan, that we acclimate to things, even the worst of things, but that happens through a slow process of just being dulled down, dulled down, dulled down. Any thoughts on this metaphor? Is there something here we could learn in our personal lives about something that might be dulling our spirit, dulling our will to be? Marilyn.
Yeah, I think you can only be terrorized for so long and then you go numb. And that's where the
Mm,
dulling comes in because you just can't, yeah, you've just been pounded. I mean, terror, yeah, you just can't keep up that mental state of terror. So you just kind of shut down, shut off, and then
hmm
that's where the dulling comes in. But yeah, that metaphor is a long, slow process. I mean, it's very, it really is hard to take. I mean, the book was very hard to take a lot of times with
Yeah,
what she went through, and very
yeah,
enlightening too, just to look back and see that. I thought she did a good job.
yeah, wonderful. Sally, go ahead.
So I really did like this book. The only thing I didn't like about it is if I was her, I would be screaming and raging about WTF, what just happened? And I felt
hmm
like there wasn't that type of emotion. She goes from
hmm
the 1970s to the 1800s and slavery. Oh my God, I would, in her situation, I would be totally freaking out, not knowing
Hmm.
how to handle it. And it seemed like she was so relaxed and so, okay,
Hmm.
here I am. This is what we're going to do. And I think that was missing for me because I think that emotion shows like, oh my God, what just happened? But
Hmm.
as far as also the doling, I think in today's society, I think we get dulled. O- and to me, doling sometimes means dumbing down
Hmm.
by social media,
Hmm.
by the internet, by technology, even the movies we watch. Of course, Eddie, you got me on this Cal Newport thing. He
Sorry.
mentioned that not too long ago, he mentioned that Netflix has now changed all their movies because people can't focus on movies anymore. They can't think anymore. And that's, the technology, social media is dulling us down because we're doing so much doom scrolling. And so he was saying that Netflix are now creating movies where we don't have to focus. So the movies will allow us to doom scroll and then watch the movie, doom scroll and watch the movie. So we just cut our time with the movie. Whereas, like the
Yeah.
older movies, if you notice some of the older movies, you really had to sit and watch it and think and follow it. Nowadays, that's it. Your brain's wiped out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we often think about people who lived hundreds or thousands of years ago and think, oh, we are so much more advanced. We live in 2026 and we have the technology and we're smart and healthy. But back then, I mean, children were studying poetry, they were learning multiple languages, they were learning how to, at lunch, instead of playing, they would go out and learn how to defend themselves with swords. Just like they were way more advanced in so many levels, right? It's crazy.
I'm also reading
Cindy.
that book,
Oh,
The Anxious Generation, which is
oh.
about technology, and our kids are now so much more anxious. And we
Mm,
have helicopter parents, and we can't even go out and play. I mean, I was
mm.
6 years old and wandering around the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Definitely has changed. Hi, Cindy.
Hi there. Um, the thing that strikes me about this is um, in the case of abuse, I think what gets dulled is your
Hmm.
sense of self worth. And
Mm,
I mean, I was in an abusive marriage. I've experienced religious abuse, and your sense of self worth tends to get diminished and dulled, and it takes um, some light or some acknowledgement or some renewal of your mind that helps you realize that you are worth more than you've been made to believe, that gives you the courage to recognize and break free. But that's only like in the case of slavery, there's not breaking free is trying to run, which could ultimately end you up in a worse situation. But that's what the dulling is to me, is the sense of self worth.
I love this comment. I think, if anything, this is probably something many people in this room can relate to at some point in life, is the sense of dulling to self-worth. Um, yeah, yeah, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that. John,
Hi Eddie. Hi everyone.
good to
Happy
see
New
you.
Year. Happy New Year. I just wanted to comment on what Cindy said. I agree with what she said, but I also think that Dana was uh, sort of just trying to survive. It was a survival uh, technique or a mechanism um, to survive. I mean, she actually was a little more courageous than I expected. She said a lot of things that were risky, but I think what else? Oh, also, I had to look up doom scrolling because I don't even know what doom scrolling was. I mean, Hmm. Interesting about the the Netflix and then watch the movie. I thought, oh boy. Um, Also, I guess just to repeat, I think Cindy kind of reinforced it too a little bit there. I mean, Dana just didn't rage against the machine as much as we're thinking she should, but it's her life. It's her back that's going to be whacked, or her face that's going to be hit with a butt or shot or whatever. It's easy for us to say, but why didn't all of those Jews rise up against the Nazis? Well, it's a survival thing, and so anyway, that's just my thought. I don't know that Dana. I thought Dana was pretty courageous.
Yeah, yeah, nice, excellent. Uday.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more of a self-preservation that causes you to dull. If you are, from personal perspective, like when I went through residency and internship and training it was very, very grueling. And you kind of are not, after a while, you're not fazed by the horrible things you see or do because if you were, you kind of go nuts. So it's a self-preservation to kind of just let things kind of dull so you're not impacted as much. So that's what I got out of that statement there.
That's actually interesting. There are moments where maybe dulling is not always a bad thing. I mean, I think about a surgeon who might be cutting me open to save my life or whatever. I don't want him or her squeamish or emotional or attached. I just want them doing the job, you know? Yeah. Steve, what's up?
I was just going to say thank you, Cindy, for sharing that. And along the same lines, I think it's easy for us to look at someone's situation when we're not in that situation and say, "Well, you're in an abusive relationship. Why don't you leave your husband or why don't you leave your wife?" And the reality is, we're not in that same
Mhm.
situation, so it's easy for us to think that it's a simple, it's just a simple decision. I like you're going to get out of bed and go make a cup of coffee. The reality is, it's not never that simple. And and the other thing with Sally's point, which is a very good point, but I wonder if for Dana, the reason why it was challenging for her on a different level too is her own existence depended on what happened in those scenes, because she
Mhm.
could have easily have killed Rufus before the Hagar was born, and who knows if Dana would have been there. She alludes to that with Kevin towards the end of the book, but so I wonder if that was maybe part of why she was, I don't want to say reserved or afraid to do anything, but the reality is it's easy to judge when we're not in that position, but being in that position really changes things. And psychologically for these other families, if they stood up, they stood the chance of losing their kids, losing their spouse, and it wouldn't be anything for them to be taken away and sold down somewhere else. So I think there's just a lot of psychological fears that existed, and that happens today too with us in our society.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Derek, go
I
ahead.
was thinking about something I read in another book once. I'm pretty sure it was in a Malcolm Gladwell book, and he was talking about the military training that the U.S. military used to do to try to train soldiers to withstand torture. So the only way to do that is to torture them, and they would do this brutal torture to try to desensitize them so that they would hopefully do better if they were tortured, which ultimately was a big failure. But anyway, there's this psychologist monitoring it and looking at everything and then interviewing the soldiers afterwards to see what they remembered or how they felt. And they had almost no memory of it. Like it was just so overwhelming for them. Their brain just shuts it all out. There was even one where he's asking the soldier something, and the soldier's like, "Oh, Doc, when did you get here?" And it's like, "I've been sitting in the room the whole time." It's like, "Oh, I never even noticed you." So and I think to compare that to what Dana's going through, when she has these moments, like if she's being beaten or where she firmly believes her life is threatened, it's just so mentally overwhelming. The brain has to shut it all out. And so then when you come out of that into more of the mundane drudgery of slavery, you just relax into that because it's better than that overwhelming thing your brain couldn't handle.
Yeah, we we selectively delete things again out of survival, probably. I'm definitely not an expert in anything psychology. I just know my own personal life. I seem to have selective memory about things that are positive versus negative. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, hey everybody. I have a little bit of a different tack in reading this. I saw this more as a reflection on pain,
Mhm.
property, and power. This is what I held in my mind. And Eddie, you started off with the question about becoming a slave and what that entails. Also, what about that becoming a master? You know,
Mhm.
what how does that happen, and how seductive is that? If you have that opportunity. But I looked at this not so much in terms of the psychology of Dana, because to me there was an artifice, a science fiction artifice in this, is that she had to endure because she knew she she felt she wouldn't exist because she had to see that her grandmother or great grandmother was going to be born, Hagar. Anyway, I looked at it from that perspective.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. There's always multiple people at play here for sure. Byron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about the word conformity, hearing all these great comments, and everyone grows up with that. I certainly did, and there were aspects to my life that I focused on along with that. But when you're in a hospital or institutional setting, you certainly have to find a way to play by the rules. Otherwise, they don't let you do anything. And I've
Mm,
experienced that in my younger years. And then, I guess in a societal way, my sister was always such a conformist, and so is my brother is too. And their lives are complicated because more so because they each had kids, but at the same time, watching how they grow up and how they dealt with conformity, only one of them seems to have evaded that, and it's a scary thing to I have found a place in my life where I do what I care to, and I'm very blessed, and I'm grateful for that. But when I could only imagine what it's like to carve out a life at 21, let alone 18, and just face what's going on in this world. And we can talk about this country again if we want to, but you know, suffice to say, there's always a challenge, and I would never say that my challenges were even remotely equal to the challenges that black slaves had in America in those times.
mm.
I don't have it in me.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Ryan, go ahead.
Eddie, I didn't attend last session.
Mhm.
Did this group already talk about the significance of where where Kevin and Dana moved at the beginning to Altadena?
I don't know that we pointed that out. Go ahead.
Well, I have to raise this because I heard work terms like conformity and property and power,
Mhm.
and I don't know if folks know that I live just a few miles away from Altadena.
Mhm.
And Altadena, I think it was very intentional, both historically, but also for the purposes of this novel, that Butler chose that Dana and Kevin, a biracial couple, moves to Altadena because Altadena was one of the few communities in Southern California where an African American could buy property, even through
Mhm.
like the 70s. I mean, it was like because of redlining, right? And Altadena became one of the few neighborhoods in Southern California that had a vibrant African American community that owned their homes. And the kind of scary part about this is that tomorrow marks the 1 year anniversary of when that community got wiped out by a wildfire.
Mhm.
That started yesterday. I mean, a year tomorrow.
Mhm.
And that was part of the tragedy was that one of the few communities that had African Americans owning real estate, it got wiped out by wildfire.
Mhm.
And that also resonated with me. I mean, I think that we talk about about going back to, antebellum America, but we forget, or we may not realize that coming back to 1970s Altadena, you still had, class, race divisions, class divisions, and a community that was created because of redlining.
Mm, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. All right, let's go to 190. I'm actually going to combine notes, page 190 and 191. They're the same part of the story. I just felt they were two different ideas, but we'll combine them. So I'm going to read a little longer than I normally would. But this is after Kevin's been gone for quite a long time, and he's come back and he's like fumbling in the kitchen. He's trying to find his way back to modern life, and he's really not doing well with it. So in the middle of page 190, it says, I found him fiddling with the stove, turning the burners on, staring into the blue flame, turning them off, opening the oven, peering in. He had his back to me and didn't see or hear me. Before I could say anything, he slammed the oven door and stalked away, shaking his head. Christ, he muttered, I'm not home yet. If I'm not home yet, maybe I don't have a home. He went into the dining room without noticing me. I stayed where I was, thinking, remembering. I could recall walking along the narrow dirt road that ran past the Whalen house and seeing the house, shadowy in twilight, boxy and familiar, yellow light showing from some of the windows. Whalen was surprisingly extravagant with his candles and oil. I had heard that the other people were not. I could recall feeling relief at seeing the house, feeling that I had come home, and having to stop and correct myself, remind myself that I was in an alien and dangerous place. I could recall being surprised that I would come to think of such a place as home. That was more than 2 months ago when I went to get help for Rufus. I'd been home to 1976, to this house, and it hadn't felt that homelike. It didn't now. For one thing, Kevin and I had lived here together for only 2 days. The fact that I had 8 extra days here alone didn't really help. The time, the year was right, but the house just wasn't familiar enough. I felt as though I were losing my place here in my own time. Rufus's time was a sharper, stronger reality. The work was harder. The smells and tastes were stronger. The danger was greater. The pain was worse. Rufus's time demanded things of me that had never been demanded before, and it could easily kill me if I did not meet its demands. That was a stark, powerful reality that the gentle conveniences and luxuries of this house, of now, could not touch. Comparison of two realities, two different types of homes, and she's struggling to figure out where she lives in this timeline and what home she can identify with. And it's interesting because an argument's being made here for both. Yeah, we live in a time of convenience and modernity. Back then, it was horrible and grueling and difficult. At the same time, she's feeling some interesting connection to the past, mainly because of the experiences she's going through. I'd love to open this up and ask why. I don't have answers here, but I will share one thing with you. I don't know if you've ever felt like you've been running on the hedonic treadmill where you just wake up, work, go to bed, do that again and again. And all of a sudden a year's gone by and you're like, what the freak just happened? And it's a good time to say that because it's a new year. Well, this happens because we do the same thing repetitively in a very convenient modern society. Nothing really new happens to us, right? It's all the same. It all blurs in. There was a study done where people were asked their sort of experience with time, and they were sat in front of a television, shown images. And in one study, one group was shown the same 5 images again and again. Like, I can't remember what they were, like a boat, a truck, a car, and they just kept replaying those images. Well, after 30 seconds of seeing these images, their brains just like tuned out, and they were like, they just waited for it to be over. The second group, of course, was shown a different image every time for the period of, 5 minutes or whatever it was. And the two groups, when asked, how long do you think you were in the room for, gave very different answers. The people who were in there for being shown the same image felt like the 5 minutes passed in 30 seconds to maybe a minute, just super fast. They just zoned out. The people who were shown unique images all the time felt that they were in there for like 30 minutes because they were constantly zoned in, constantly working, constantly thinking. Just an interesting thought. If you feel like your life's going by too quickly, if you feel like you're zooming along, try showing yourself different images versus the same 3 images every day. Give yourself something new to do or to think about. I know that's a poor comparison because we're talking about the hardships of slavery here, but it made me think about that and I wanted to share it. Any thoughts on Dana's experience with trying to connect with home, with Kevin slamming doors, with all these modern conveniences? Uday.
That two things came to my mind on this. One is, certainly all their perspectives of the time that they spend in the 1800s is compared to when they come back, oh, you've only been gone for a few hours. That so their memories are of more prolonged time in one time space than the other. And
Mhm.
so I think it makes them think more that they belong in that time space, that they have the memory of being. The other thing I thought of is, hey, maybe Dana's life in the modern day has not been that meaningful to her, and that she's actually finding more meaning by having this sort of mission to go back and allow her ancestors to be born and the things she needs to do. So her life may seem more meaningful in the past than it is in her current
Yeah.
contemporary time.
Yeah, interesting. Fantastic. Kimberly.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on that, I think not to this is not about the atrocities of slavery. It's just about the sense of belonging is the topic in this question. And I feel like every time that I have like worked with people, volunteered with people, or been in my children's schools where I've like cleaned the classroom or gone in on Saturday mornings with my children where we've brought mulch to put under the playground or whatever. It's a strong sense of belonging when you work with others more than if you just sort of mail it in. And I think that's kind of what I'm taking away from this is that she like had this experience with like working with who's the main cook? I can't remember her name. Sarah.
Tara?
Yeah. And just with you kind of you bond with people when you work with them and you have a common purpose with people. And I think that's the to your point, Eddie, in your book club is like what is the takeaway? It's like if you get out and pick up the trash in your boulevards or whatever, that's a sense of belonging and bonding, and you're going to connect with others. And that's what I want to add to this question.
Yeah, great comment. Thank you. Anna.
Hi there.
Hey.
That the question about Dana tied to the past, she felt her I the tie. I was thinking about how they need her. She need to teach to them to read and things like that. She felt there was like a need even to help Rufus. There was some kind of need. Well, the question that came to my mind is about Kevin because Kevin was there for 5 years, and where Dana felt more of a tie on a short amount of time that she was there compared to Kevin, but Kevin was like, "I'm done." I feel like he was never wanted to go back, never want to even think about that place. I mean, I got that idea from the epilogue.
Mm.
Um, whereas Dana, her mind was still, her heart was still back in the past. And
Mm.
so I was just kind of thinking about that, about the difference between them two.
Yeah. Yeah, the amount of time they spent there is very different. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was actually there for 8 years, wasn't he? I could be wrong. Is that right? 5 years, 8 years? I can't remember. A long time. One of the two. Okay. Let's go to 219. So she has gone home for a moment, and then she gets zapped back. And right now, we've had the experience where she's being expected to sort of be the nurse and doctor for these people because she has modern knowledge and some basic modern medicines with her. And so she has been asked to take care of Rufus's father, Tom. who passes, and she is punished for that and beaten and sent out into the fields by Rufus. It's a horrible thing because she was not able to save him, and now she's been asked to take care of Rufus's mother, and she's really panicked about that. But here in a chapter titled "The Storm," she is trying to figure out how to connect with and be with this woman, Margaret Whalen, who in previous visits has been just horrible to her. And so it says here at the top of 219, as the days passed, I learned to take longer than necessary when she sent me on errands. I learned to tell lies to get away from her when I thought I was about to explode. I learned to listen silently while she talked and talked and talked, mostly about how much better things were in Baltimore than here. I never learned to like sleeping on the floor of her room, but she wouldn't permit the trundle bed to be brought in. She honestly didn't see that it was any hardship for me to sleep on the floor. Black people always slept on the floor. All right. So that I think this is interesting because the reason why I picked this passage is because we just have in our minds, whether we're willing to admit it or not, certain rules about certain kinds of people that we think are just normal. We believe that accountants are a certain kind of people. We believe that a specific race of people are a certain act a certain way, and so on. And this challenged me to sort of think about how I have unwritten rules in my head, but that they do exist, and I'm trying to figure out what those are. So, for example, just a thought experiment. You don't have to raise your hand here, but what are your rules for what should happen to people younger than you? How should people younger than you behave? What are your rules for people that are older than you? What are your unwritten rules for people who are Muslim or Jewish or Christian or atheist? Right? What are your unwritten rules for people who don't parent the way you parent? So many ways to think about this. Byron, go ahead.
Yeah, well, before you said that, I'm kind of blown away with that. You know, my husband is a retired lieutenant colonel.
Mhm.
I have a nephew who was in the Marines. He served in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he got into some kind of situation where he left the military. But you know, Jim, my husband, he was deployed in Desert Storm, but most of his life, 25 years, he spent working for the VA, helping people. He's a nurse practitioner and he's
Mhm.
very highly skilled. Now he's just doing clinical work. But even I'll speak of Jim first. Even he hates Russians. His
Mhm.
whole life, since the day he started in the Navy, he ended up in the Army. But for his whole life, he just had that mindset. And then, like my nephew hates Muslims, and he says that on Facebook. And he spent a lot of time messaging me about respecting him. And finally, I just sort of said, "Hey, I respect you. You have your own history, you have your own life, you have everything that led up to how you believe. I'm never going to trample on that." And ever since that message I sent him, I haven't heard from him since. And he's got a son now, and it's pretty wrenching to me.
Mhm.
But Jim kind of says, when you're in that path or on that path, you end up doing what you do. So,
Mhm.
but the mindset of being under something or signing up for something is entirely different. And I've kind of learned that from both of those people in my life.
Mm. Yeah, excellent. Tara, go ahead.
So this is just a quick little aside. When you mention like, you have certain thoughts of like what you think an accountant should be like, I immediately thought of that Ben Affleck movie because I always found the concept of that movie so hilarious. That character is as far as you can get from my thoughts of what an accountant would be like.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's, I guess, what made it a distinct and unique movie and set it apart from the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Those accountants, man, don't ever trust them. Crazy people. Crazy people. All right, let's do this. Page, where are we at here? 224. So this is an interesting passage because it comes with uh, a nice not nice, it's terrible, but an example of sort of how our physical appearance is it's the hand we're dealt with, right? And we have to learn to play with those cards. Anyway, Dana is in the house, and I can't remember who it is. One of the other girls um, goes to like, oh, Carrie, who's not exactly fully mentally up to speed, at least many people think, is sort of going like this, wiping her face, and Dana doesn't understand. So on page 224 at the top, it says, frustrated, she, Carrie, took me by the hand and led me out to where Nigel was chopping firewood. There, before him, she repeated the face rubbing gesture, and he nodded. She means it doesn't come off, Dana, he said quietly. The black. She means the devil with people who say you're anything but what you are. I hugged her and got away from her quickly so that she wouldn't see that I was close to tears. I went up to Margaret Whalen, and she just had her laudanum. Being with her at such times was like being alone, and being alone was just what I needed. So I don't know why that passage hit me so much, but you've got this girl who's like, you can't wipe off what you are, right? This is what your life is, and you have to sort of learn. And it's a powerful message because this is coming from the girl who is considered sort of deaf, dumb, and mute sort of thing by many of the people there. Like she's got a hand that she's being dealt with, and yeah. Any thoughts about this passage? I don't even know what to comment here. Just like it hit me. You can't wipe it off. It feels like, oh, good. Uday, go ahead. Oh, let's see, you're on mute there.
On the page before, where she
Hmm.
was talking to Carrie about why she thinks I can see why there are those who think that I'm more white than black because of the way
Hmm.
she behaves, that she's not behaving like a typical
Hmm.
black slave. And so I think so I that's why she's saying, no, you're not white underneath, you're black. You can't rub this off, is how I interpreted it. But um, I don't know if that's what you were getting at or what exactly was.
I think I'm looking for some help here. I don't know what I'm getting at. It just felt like a powerful passage, and I wanted to talk about it. It seems like, or I don't know, John, what do you think?
Um, well, I want to touch upon it obliquely in that I think that thought of hers about it, you can't rub it off, actually strongly affects her relationship with Kevin. There's stress and tension between Dana and Kevin because she thinks he doesn't understand, can't understand, won't understand, and even is or could become more like the oppressors that are back in the 19th century. And I just I was affected by that, her relationship with Kevin,
Yeah,
and it's manifest in ways like this, yeah, here I am,
nice.
and how can you think that in a way? Sometimes she doesn't even say it, but she's saying, how can he think like that? How can he say that? How can he? So yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
nice,
thanks.
good, awesome. Pam, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm really interested to hear what everybody else has been saying about this, particularly because the paragraph struck me slightly as well, and I'm kind of in line with you, Day, on this too. Um, but I took away a piece where, and it really tied into our full conversation, about conscious and unconscious bias and how we categorize people, and for her, it was really about, you know, or what it brought up to me or made me think about was the assumptions we make by how someone looks or even how they behave and then connecting it to how they look. Really, just this idea of bias a little
Mm.
deeper. I know that's, a pretty powerful word right now, but in her environment, there was a very definitive line based on color.
Hmm.
That was the primary in that space and time. It was a deciding factor. And it
Hmm.
was more than a label and more than a bias and all the it was it just is. I'm not agreeing with it, obviously, but that was the context and what it was. And so people around her um, were, kind of she wasn't behaving as they expected because of her
Hmm.
color.
Hmm.
And it goes back to this assumption because she is this color, then A plus B equals C, right? And she was
Yeah.
doing X. So,
Yeah.
that they're not dealing well with that because in that environment, there wasn't much of that because of all the other things we talked about. We talked about people having to survive and somehow acclimate, and make very difficult choices. So, in that moment for me, it was, Dana had this privilege of living in a different time where she was able to voice discontent and kind of fight the man. And there had been civil rights, like all this stuff in her head that she probably wasn't even aware of was influencing how she behaved. She was
Yeah.
reading books
Yeah.
to know how slaves behave. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I got to quick read this history book because I'm not sure how this all goes. Um,
Yeah.
or the story she heard. But so for me, it was just about assumptions, but yet in the context of that definitive time, um, she wasn't behaving at all from
Mm.
their perspective. So she kept trying to inch towards that line,
Mm.
to make it, but it was a juxtaposition. It was a really hard tension from who she really was to how she had to behave and then how others were looking at her. I don't know.
Nice. Yeah.
I just confused
Good.
myself. So somebody
You're
unwrap
good. You're good. I appreciate it. Thank you. Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, so on the one hand, there's the undeniable objective truth to what Carrie's saying. Like, objectively, yes, the black doesn't rub off. You are black. But then tacking on with what Pam was saying there, why do we behave the way we behave? And we learned so much about that reading the book Behave by Robert Sapolsky. And he went into, like, there's the intricate stuff like your chemical balance in your brain and your hormone levels, and then there's cultural stuff, the environment you're raised in, the family you lived in, the time period and the place that you live in. It all factors into it. And so being black in 1815 is very different from being black in 1976. And even in 1815, being black in Maryland is not the same as being black in New York City, or even, as you mentioned so many times, it's not the same as being black in Mississippi or Louisiana. She talks so often about how much worse it would be in the South. I think to a large extent, just because it would be so much harder to escape the farther south you are. So at least being in Maryland, you're sort of adjacent to a different potential lifestyle. And so, yeah, objectively, the black doesn't rub off, but being black is different depending on the time period and the environment you're living in.
Mm. Yeah, nice. Cindy, go ahead.
I wonder if it was, in a way, a comment trying to keep Dana in her place. Like, you can't pretend not to be black.
Mhm.
It's hopeless. Kind of accept it and just fall into line. Kind of. I don't know.
Yeah, it felt a little like that to me as well. Yeah. Thomas.
See here. Yeah, I was gonna just jump back to the what we were talking about when it came to um, her not, I don't want to say this, her not being able to understand or believe that Kevin can think the way he's thinking, or that, even when he looked at what she was going through, you could see it mortified him though. I mean, it was horrible, but I did kind of the romantic in me. One thing I liked about this is though they were under such stress together and strained, you never doubt in the book that they loved each other. And
Mhm.
I just kind of liked that. It gave me a warm, in that horrible situation, it gave me this warm feeling because it was like, you know, they could survive anything. And despite the fact that their worlds were so, I mean, completely different and they couldn't always understand each other, they still loved each other. And when they were separated, they were hell bent on getting back, back together. So I don't know. That just kind of gave me some hope, especially in the world we live in today and how polarized everyone is, to see signs where people can have very different perspectives, that are even forced upon them by their circumstance, but still, care for each other.
Mm. Nice. Excellent. John, go ahead.
Just a geographic note, they mentioned Easton as being the closest town, and that's not so far. I'm looking at a map now
Mm.
from Delaware, from Annapolis, Washington, Baltimore. I mean, I have this idea in my head, an assumption that the further south you got, the worse it was. There was all that cotton and all that mythology around the deep south. This is really almost up where free people live, and I thought it was interesting that Butler said it there, kind of close to, so close, but not close enough to freedom.
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with this guy. So Frederick Douglass, I mean, she mentions him in the book, but this is where his story takes place. So this is a location on slavery that a lot of her readers would have been familiar with, and it kind of said it really well. So Maryland is where he was enslaved, and scary stuff. But yeah, it's crazy, crazy where it sits. Okay, I'm going to skip a few notes because we have a couple people that are needing to leave. And quickly, I would just like to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, well, I've got more people here than not. Hold up your fingers and let me know. 1, you hated it, 10, you loved it. How did this book go for you? What did you think about this book? This helps me figure out what to read in the future. Okay, nice. Good. Awesome. Very cool. Um, let's do this. I'm going to hang out for a minute and read a little longer. So if you can stay, great. If you need to go, remember that we're not reading this week as a club, but we are meeting next Tuesday. Great time to just come hang out and share what you've been reading and make some recommendations. And then we will start Being Immortal by Atul Gawande next Tuesday. Okay, it's interesting that I grabbed the Frederick Douglass book because his story is a story of a slave educating himself through various means, and in doing so, earned his freedom, became one of the nation's most popular speakers and writers, worked his way up to being friends with President Abraham Lincoln, and so on. I love that book because it shows the power of education for people of all races and colors and why educating ourselves is so important. But what I love about it is that Douglass educated himself. Ultimately, we are responsible for educating ourselves. And I think that's the passage I want to read next, which is on page 236. Dana is brought back, and the father has passed away. Rufus is now the master on the plantation, and he is softening because of Alice and other influences. And so he's allowing for his children and other people to be educated by Dana. She's becoming a bit of a schoolmaster or a teacher on the plantation. And in doing so, Rufus is getting lectured by his neighbors who do not like this. They're not excited about this. And chapter 13, on page 236, it says, some of his neighbors found out what I was doing and offered him fatherly advice. It was dangerous to educate slaves, they warned. Education made blacks dissatisfied with slavery. It spoiled them for field work. The Methodist minister said it made them disobedient, made them want more than the Lord intended them to have. Another man said educating slaves was illegal. When Rufus replied that he had checked and that it wasn't illegal in Maryland, the man said it should have been. Talk. Rufus shrugged it off without ever saying how much of it he believed. It was enough that he sided with me, and my school continued. I got the feeling that Alice was keeping him happy and maybe finally enjoying herself a little in the process. I guessed from what she had told me that this was what frightened her so, driving her away from the plantation, causing her to lash out at me. She was trying to deal with guilt of her own. A lot in that passage, but the concept that people believed that education spoiled a slave. It made them dissatisfied with slavery. And this is what I love. I love this message that when you are educated, you understand your options and you understand how to achieve those options. And the best thing we can do for ourselves is to get educated. The best thing we can do for our children is to help them love and value the process of education, to love books and so on. But any thoughts about this passage, about restricting education as a means of control. This is something that many totalitarian organizations do. They restrict communication, education, they ban books, they control communication channels, all in an effort to squeeze education from the people, right? Any thoughts about this? Cindy, go ahead.
To me, it goes back to that concept of it's the opposite of that concept of dulling. Like it
Hmm.
sharpens, right? And
Mhm.
and even in my example of saying that it abusive situations dull your self-worth, education, on the contrary, kind of raises your self-worth. I think um, makes you feel better about yourself, and it empowers you. So he's
Mhm.
absolutely right, or they were absolutely right. It's terrible for the institution of slavery.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. Great. Peter, go ahead.
Sorry, I had to find the button. Hi,
You're
guys.
good.
Um,
Hi.
Education being, uh, to me, education is perceived as a threat by all those who want to control us, right? And
Mhm.
and education is not what what most people that I want to try to dominate us. Look at the church's history where they didn't want you to read and read the Bible, and I mean, this has been going on forever. A little story I wanted to share is when I graduated, I went to boarding school as a kid. Grew up in Japan, and then they sent me to Europe. And
Mhm.
I graduated from boarding school, and the gift that I got from my father is a beautiful leather envelope with every single receipt ever spent on my education. And he was very serious. It was a nice dinner, and he gave it to me. He said, "This, Pete, this is the most important and valuable thing I'll ever be able to give you is education." What I thought was
Mhm.
funny about that is that at the time I felt very lucky. I went to a great school. I had a lot of opportunity. What I think is funny is the reaction of like my wife, my friends are like, "Oh my God, that's horrible," right? And so they think she should get a car, a watch, or whatever. But I got the gift two gifts: the gift of education and the focus that this is really the most important thing you can give somebody is freedom and the
Yeah.
freedom to make your own choice. So um, in many places in the world today and in the past, education is restricted or in many ways it's curated in such a way that we learn what we're supposed to learn, not what we can learn. And I
Mm.
love that about this book, how that kind of um, points that out a little bit. That you know, they're not afraid that they're not going to like being slaves. Which slave wanted to be a slave? They're afraid that they're going to rise up against the people that are dominating them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also liked how the masters themselves really couldn't read, right? I mean, they weren't that educated themselves. They were
So,
just in a position of power. So if a slave could read more than you, that's a threat, right? Interesting.
yep.
Thomas, go ahead.
Well, yeah, this kind of reminded me too of people who are parts of cults and stuff. You have to limit information to keep people obedient. And that's really what, I mean, slavery was about obedience. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do what I tell you. I'm going to control you. A slave or a culture the same way. It's all about obedience, and the only way to keep people obedient is to limit their access to information, ideas, other ways of life. All of the things. So, um, and it really reflects on the world we even see today that a lot of people are controlled in a way because well, some of them actually choose to be ignorant. There's also that component. There are people that choose not to know things because they don't want their worldview changed or altered or rocked in any way. So, um, of course, we see this theme a lot in books. The idea that if you can't read, if you can't access information, you're at a disadvantage. So, really, yeah, education would have been the very, very enemy of slavery because, of course, eventually it did lead to the end of slavery. It's a fascinating topic because it always comes back to education. That's the thing that people need to improve themselves and to have an improved life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Steve, go ahead.
Was going to say, I don't remember who said it earlier about dumbing down society, but it kind of reminded me of what seems to be happening today, where education seems to be, being under attack by different parts of society, where a child who expresses interest in literature or history is told, well, there's no money in that, there's no future in that. Why would you want to read about history or read about literature? You should learn to be an electrician, learn to be a welder because there's money there. There, the trades are. And I'm in a job where this is a trade. I drive a truck. It's a trade. It's a hands-on position. But it kind of resonated with me in the sense that we seem to be reverting back to this idea that education is not that important unless it's some kind of trade. And to me, it's such a disservice we do to younger people in terms of getting them to read more or getting them interested in things strictly because it's something they're interested in, not it's something that will make them more money than somebody else. And so I looked at it. It kind of reminded me of what seems to be happening more and more today with this attack against education, and in our society and really in other parts of the world too.
Mm, yeah. Nice. Excellent. Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts here. Like anytime someone is trying to tell you that education or reading this or that is a bad thing, you need to be really suspicious of that person because they're trying to keep you down or keep you in your place in some way. Like the example of religion, there are religions which lean more towards the cult end of the spectrum, that they control what media you're allowed to consume, whether or not you're allowed to watch television, what books you're allowed to read, what newspapers you're allowed to read. And that's the way of keeping you in your place. It wasn't that long ago that Vice President J.D. Vance said that higher education is the enemy. Anytime someone tells you that education is the enemy, you need to be really suspicious of that person's motivations. Eddy, you made a point there about how a lot of the white people weren't very literate in this time period either, and it reminded me of something, the term grandfathering. That term, like you say, they've changed the rules on such and such, but I've been grandfathered in under the old rules. So the origin of that term relates to this. When slavery was abolished, and all of a sudden these blacks, they go from being property to being people, and not just people, being citizens, it means they have the right to vote. So in the South, all these whites wanted to figure out ways, well, how do we suppress the vote? How do we keep them from voting on things? Because they're going to take over. There's so many of them. So one of the things was, well, we'll put in literacy rules because all these former black slaves, they're illiterate. If we say that you have to pass a literacy test before you're allowed to vote, it keeps them from voting. Well, the problem was there was a lot of illiterate white people. There was a lot of basically white trash that happened to be property owners that couldn't pass the literacy test either. So the way they got around that was they created this grandfathering clause. You didn't have to take the literacy test if your grandfather voted in an election. So that was their way of allowing the uneducated white people to vote, but not allow the illiterate black people to vote.
Interesting. I love that. Now, I just shared something in the chat. Again, our motto is to read slowly, take notes, and apply the ideas. We've talked a lot about education tonight. I just shared with you the Harvard University's free catalog. These are courses that Harvard offers online that you can take right along with the students. You just don't get credit for them. And there are courses in philosophy, art, Shakespeare, astronomy, whatever you want, right? They're all there right along with the Harvard crew. I've done a few of these. I took an entire course on Plato's Republic through Harvard, and I loved it. And yeah, you can actually get certificates through this too if you choose to, if you pay a little bit of money to say that I have a certificate in X, Y, or Z. So if you're trying to think about 2026 and how you're going to educate yourself, this is a fun way to do it because there's a lot of classes out there and you can sort of do it at your own time. So check those out. But think about something you can do to take care of your own education this year. I get in trouble for saying this at times, but I'm going to say it anyway because I feel it's true. YouTube is not education. I don't think YouTube is a good way to educate yourself. I know Tony is shocked, but you would be surprised at how much hate mail I get when I say something like that. People are like, yes, it is. There's great stuff on YouTube. No, it's not. YouTube is not education. Try sitting in a class, go to a lecture, take notes, actually take a test, prove your knowledge. Education is very different from passive watching of a video. So I would encourage everybody this year to invest in themselves, do something uncomfortable in the form of educating yourself and see what happens. Any final thoughts for the evening or for this book before we wrap up? Sally, go ahead.
The arm.
The
What
arm.
about
Oh, yeah.
wrapping up the arm?
Ah, I know. She lost her arm in the wall.
But it starts that way and ends that way. So what is the meaning of the arm?
I think it's a device to keep you reading, personally. I think it was a great first line that just made people go, what? What's the arm thing? And so the whole time they're reading, and it gets people to the end of the book. I could be wrong. Maybe there's a deeper meaning to it. Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I was mesmerized by the arm, and I was thinking,
Yeah.
okay, the phantom limb thing in her sleeve. So I'm turning that around in my head, and I think, well, okay, the phantom limb in the sleeve. Well, there's a liminal phantom of slavery in Dana's life. She's always on that threshold of slavery. I think that I thought so. I came to the conclusion that became a very good metaphor in this book. That's where I went with the arm.
Nice. Very cool. John.
I don't know if she meant it or if Butler intended it, but to me, I didn't want to think too much about the mechanics of the time travel. But to me, it says that she's just not done with that past. She's still, and maybe it is, symbolic, but she's still there a bit. She's not all the way here nor there. So that's just a random thought I had.
Awesome. Yeah. Love it. Kathy.
Yeah, I don't know what the true meaning of it is either, but I thought of it as a more like a metaphor. We talk about how black slavery is, I mean, people today have scars, generations, have scars from what happened back then. And even going through the Jim Crow era, there's a lot of scars, and the black people are very affected by that even today. Even though, you know, different races can't obviously understand it, but for some reason, I think it's a scar for them, and it's
Yeah.
hard for them to get over that hump.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I was also going to say too, I think the wall closing up and like grabbing her arm, to me it felt like that was the universe's way of saying you're done. There will be no more time travel. Like Rufus is dead, like this portal is closed, and here's a physical reminder that you're not going back, kind of thing. Cindy.
I took it as two ways. One, she left part of herself there, and she was forever
Oh,
changed.
oh, love it. That's great. Yeah, you just made the book better. Thank you, Cindy. Pam.
Total alignment with Cindy and John. My thought process was that, we're all connected somehow to the past, but it was again a metaphor for kind of the scarring and how it impacts the future. So all the things that the last three people said was exactly where I went. So I couldn't agree more. I think it was very deliberate, and the closing of the wall was absolutely kind of a stopping point where, there it is, get some rest, but there's still part of her back there, and they're all connected to our past. So
Yeah, good. Wendy, go ahead.
I think they're holding on to each other because he feels she's Kim.
Yeah.
That's
Steve?
all I got.
No, you're great. That's great. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, along with John and Cindy, I kind of thought the same thing. She left a part of herself back there that she'll never get back, but just a reminder of what she experienced, what she went through. And, you had asked about the book and people's thoughts on it. I obviously I can't do it because I'm driving, but it was a 10 for me. And it was interesting because my wife had asked me what I thought of the book, and my first response was, it was great. And then I step back and I'm like, I don't know if that's the right adjective because it sounds like it was a really enjoyable book. It wasn't enjoyable because when you think about what people endured during those times, it's it's a sci-fi book in the sense of the time travel part of it, but that's such a minute part. And in the critical essay at the end of it, he talks about that, and how that's really just a small piece of the entire book. So yeah, it's hard to describe for me what the book meant to me. I can't say it was great in the sense that like a Frederick Bachman book per se. It'll be a book that will stay with me for a long time because what she experienced, I believe is true, and I'm sure it happened over and over and countless times during that era, and in some ways, maybe even a little bit today.
Very cool. Great share, Steve. Thank you. Thomas, go ahead.
Oh, I think this book is proof that, years ago they'd never seemed to mention this, but the past couple of years they've referred to those studies that show that when you read, you have more empathy for others. And that is one thing about this book is it really, in me anyway, created this empathy and even trying to put myself in the mind of what a Black female, which is the very opposite of what I am in every way, to put your mind and what she experienced and how difficult that would have been. And so this book really is a good book for, I think, people. I can see how it would be required reading in schools because it really does put you in the mind and life of something that you could otherwise not even, begin to think about. And so it really, if you don't have some empathy for Black people in that time, something's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Very nice. All right, everybody. I think we knocked it out of the park tonight. I want to thank you all for coming. I would encourage you to not just shut this book and move on. Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
Where does the secret door go in your library?
Yeah. Yeah. So the secret door in my library does not have a purpose yet. That space used to actually be a dark room. So I do film photography and it's pretty cool. I haven't done film photography in quite a while though. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that space. We'll see. Right now I'm making a full YouTube video of this thing and as soon as I get done with this, I'm going to go keep working on it because I have to have that entire space built in like 14 days. We've been putting 10 hours a day into that for 13 days straight now. It's been a lot of work, but we're getting there. So the first YouTube video will show this build in the library and the secret door. Then I'll do another video with whatever happens behind the door. I have no idea. Pam, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in. Thomas, thanks so much for your share. But I'm sure it may or may not surprise this group that this book is banned in many U.S. schools as well as other locations due to its intense depictions of slavery, racial conflict, and sexuality.
Yeah, for sure.
So in terms of, having recommending and having others read it and sort of gain that empathy, I think it goes again to, sort of controlling what others can read. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
share that it is a book that is commonly on the banned list.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thomas asks, when I sleep, I would like to say that this book club is proudly sponsored by Edgewater Coffee. There are many brands that you can get. I'm just kidding. I'm being a dork. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in doing what you love, and I love this book club, and I love books, and I love these things. So it just doesn't seem like it's work. I'm just having a good time doing it. So trying to do more what I love in life. That seems to give me energy. All right, friends. I love you all. I'm grateful to you. I will see you next Tuesday, and I'll see you in the chat. See you, everybody.
Good night.
Night.